Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. I'm your host, Craig Labenz, and today I'm excited to bring another Flutter-ish, but definitely Dart web-based product to all of you. It's called Jaspr. I have actually not really learned anything about it yet myself. I merely know that it exists, and I have a very, very high-level concept of its approach. And I'm looking forward to learning all about it over the next hour and a half or so with you all. So let's start to get into it. As you know, this is the Flutter community. We hold ourselves to a fairly high standard. Let's live up to it. And that's all I'll say. Today's guest, the perfect, the one, the only guest to talk about Jaspr, the Jaspr maintainer, Kilian. Kilian, I'm very excited to have you. Welcome to Observable Flutter. Would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Kilian. I'm a Flutter developer. And most importantly, I guess today, I'm the creator of Jaspr, which we're going to talk about. And I maintain a few other packages in Dart and Flutter. Have been around for a few years. Yeah, and I'm very excited to show everyone what I've been working on over the last 2 years, or 2.5 years now, actually, yeah.
Wow, that's a long time. That's a lot of commitment. And you've been named your own BDFL. That's good. That's the benevolent dictator for life. Kilian, you do seem fairly benevolent too, as well. I don't know. Maybe you'd even prefer benevolent. Maybe you'd prefer BPFL, the benevolent president for life. You don't seem like much of an iron fist sort of guy to me, but that's neither here nor there. So Jaspr, you've been working on it for 2 years, like you said. Give us the highest level. What is it, and what made you want to start building it?
I mean, the shortest pitch I can do is Jaspr is a framework for building websites in Dart. And what it is, or what it does is you can build websites, so actual HTML and CSS type of websites in pure Dart in kind of a familiar way, which looks like Flutter, but it isn't Flutter. But you have some similar concepts, you will feel familiar. But it's a pure website, so you can do everything you can do with a normal website. So you have all the benefits of it, especially SEO, loading performance, stuff like that. Also stuff that like Flutter Web isn't particularly good at. Yeah, and it's for everyone that kind of loves Dart and wants to do more with Dart than maybe building Flutter apps. And now you can also build websites.
Great. That's an excellent summary. And there's so much to dig into there. Obviously, Flutter Web has been one of the most provocative, just different. You poll any two people in the Flutter community or even just the tech community about Flutter Web, and you won't hear the same opinion twice. Poll 100 people about it, and you won't hear the same opinion twice. And that is because, I'll take a stab at summarizing kind of what's going on there, and then you, having built Jaspr, can layer on that. The web has obviously existed for decades, and it uses a very particular architecture and implementation of the DOM and this plain text way to transmit rendering instructions across the wire, and then the browsers end up rendering those instructions from the server. And then obviously JavaScript started to be able to manipulate the plain text stuff itself, and even that's 15, 20 years old, extremely old. And anyway, that's the web. And Flutter is fundamentally entirely different. And that means that 20 plus years of optimization in browsers to render HTML and CSS is unavailable to Flutter. And Flutter has the HTML renderer and the CanvasKit renderer, but the CanvasKit renderer is far stronger, far better implementation, or far more complete implementation. And so Flutter is basically committed to canvas rendering on the web. And so that is a big time fork from how the web has always worked. And that allows Flutter to do Flutter things, but it has at times struggled for Flutter to do web things. And so you're kind of threading the needle here with concepts that are familiar to Flutter developers, but you're not, everything doesn't end in a canvas. Everything ends in more conventional web tech. So you mentioned it's HTML, CSS, and do you say XHTML or XML? Which other one did I hear you say?
HTML, CSS. I think that's
Okay.
that's the main things.
All right. My brain invented something else. Yeah. So that is, I can't even really begin to fully imagine the intensity of what your engineering task was when you decided to start working on this. But yeah, how would you assess that summary of the state of things?
Yeah, like as you said, I think Flutter Web is great for if you use it for the right things. But of course, it has its limitation, and it's not for any kind of web website. And especially because the web has, as you said, like it has been optimized for such a long time, and like it's been around forever, like the last 20 years and more, and people have been optimizing and improving it, and like it's now a super amazing way to ship content to users super quickly and super efficiently. And a lot of like what the web is still today is just kind of displaying or getting information to users. And yeah, so that's what Jaspr is trying to leverage here, where kind of Flutter Web took a different approach. Jaspr is really like, hey, I want to use the things that are there on the web platform, and that like I don't need to reinvent those and get all the benefits from that. And it's a tough, as a framework and as a maintainer, it's a tough spot to be in, because of course I deliberately made it in a way that is similar to Flutter, so people will feel familiar, but you still have your own concepts and your own things to learn to be able to use Jaspr, generally develop websites. So it's like a mix of, yeah, like having things and having things that work the way you expect them, but maybe also things that work differently than you would expect them, and differently from Flutter, most importantly. I can't hear you.
Oh, wait a minute. When did I mute myself? How long was I? What was the last thing you heard me say? When did?
When I stopped talking.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was saying hi to folks from Africa. Hi, Kenya and Nigeria. I didn't even click that button on purpose. Okay. Anyway, sorry, folks. Then I started to say, Kilian, you mentioned that you have some docs and samples and some stuff that you wanted to show. Are you ready for that?
Sure. I thought it would be cool to, before diving into it, just showing a few things that people already built with Jaspr. We have like a community Discord where people post their sites they built with it, which is kind of the first thing, I'm very proud to say that the Flutteristas page is actually built with Jaspr. I think they were one of the earlier ones adopting it. Which you see, it's like a landing page, a lot of just static information, which is super great to have like a normal website for, and not a Flutter Web app. And yeah, this is built with it. There are a few other landing pages for products, for services. This is like a Flutter developer from the community who does his Flutter business. Here's another one. And then one other thing, one of the surprisingly earlier sites that I was told about is like this Russian site for you can pay your parking tickets or pay your, I think, parking fines actually. And this is super cool because the
government
maintainer,
site.
I think it's not directly, no. It's some separate service. Of course, they have like ties to the official systems, but
yeah, I would hope.
they I can't read on any of this. It's just, yeah. They built a Flutter app also, or they have also a Flutter app. And he said, the creator of that site said they could share 80% of the logic they have, because they're using Block and Jaspr. Also, you can use Block with Jaspr. And kind of 80% of that logic, that business logic, they shared actually between website and app, which is really amazing. And shows also like the power of, if you have a website built without and an app built without, of course, you can do a lot of cool stuff in code sharing here.
Oh, right. Somehow that had honestly never occurred to me, that of all of your state management stuff, your data layer stuff, your architecture, you just make that its own package.
Yeah. So one of the first things I did actually was porting Riverpod to Jaspr. It's kind of my preferred one, but anyways, like you can do that with like people from the community have also done this with Provider and Block. And yeah, you have kind of the same state management systems between Flutter and Jaspr. And for Riverpod, for example, you can share the providers. And yeah, that's a great way to have it. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So when you say you ported Riverpod, because Riverpod is a pure Dart package, right? There's Riverpod Flutter. So I guess you had to re-implement the same kind of logic that's in Riverpod Flutter, but it's like Riverpod Jaspr. Is that right?
Yes. There's Riverpod, which is pure Dart, which both Flutter Riverpod and now Jaspr Riverpod use. And yeah, Jaspr Riverpod is like a port, like a changed version, a fork of Flutter Riverpod.
Yeah. Okay.
Where I like threw out all the Flutter dependencies and added the Jaspr dependencies and did some light refactorings, but honestly, not really much.
Cool. And I was calling it Riverpod Flutter, but it's Flutter Riverpod. So I had that backwards. Okay. All right. So yeah, any of the state management packages, or at least the most popular ones that folks are accustomed to, are available here with, again, all the familiarity of those known APIs. That's great. What else do you have here up your sleeve to show us?
Maybe we can go have a quick look at like the component system. This is kind of the part, when I say it's familiar to Flutter, this is the part I mean. When Flutter, you have widgets, stateless, stateful, inherited, compose your UIs with them. In Jaspr, you have components, is the same concept, just a different name. So you have stateless, you have stateful, you have inherited. And they kind of work the same, that you have a build method, you can compose. You have state for stateful. One difference is that you return actually an iterable. So you don't, like in Flutter, you turn one widget, and Jaspr you can return multiple components. This is one of the points I mentioned earlier, where I want to leverage the things that the web platform gives me. One of those is HTML elements can have multiple children. So there isn't like in Flutter, the default one is one child.
Right.
And then you do extra stuff, have extra render objects for multiple, if you want to have multiple children. HTML is a different way. So I want to not constrain Jaspr in that way. So I changed it. And then this one here is kind of a syntax that Dart has.
Yeah, not as common.
Not really not common, but I like it very much, especially for this use case. It's super nice. So you just say sync star and you yield. So instead of return, you say yield, and then you can have multiple yield statements here, and this will then automatically create an iteral for you.
Gotcha.
And, yeah.
So what you're talking about there is how in Flutter, obviously, widgets have either a child parameter or a children parameter, or are leaf nodes and then have neither of those. But many widgets have child or children as the kind of primary parameters to keep the widget tree going. But that distinction where a widget with a child parameter can, by definition, only have one direct child, which itself could have children, but that's a Flutter thing, and it doesn't have really an analog in the web. That's what you're saying. All DOM elements can have an arbitrary amount of descendants. And one interesting thing, I know that React DOM has a similar concept where when you write your own component, that's what they're called in React as well. And this information is actually quite old, so maybe I'm actually outdated here, but I definitely remember the render method had to return a single node. And even if you had like, it was the build list method and you wanted to return all the list items, like you had to have that return some singular wrapping things. Maybe it was the list itself or some just pointless div or like something. Do you have any sense? I'm just totally riffing here. It's okay if you have no idea. Do you have any sense of why React went in that way? Because you're right, that is totally different than the DOM. Oh, we're getting from chat. Apparently that is not how it works anymore.
Yeah, I think by now you can wrap it in like a fragment, which is just an
invisible thing that plays that role.
Thing. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So I think syntactically you still, I'm super not sure, but I think syntactically you still can only return one thing. But if you wrap it with that fragment thing, the fragment will not render anything. It will not add anything to the tree.
To the DOM, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So I can only assume why they did it, but from my experience, they did it because it's super hard to do it the way I did.
Okay.
When I decided that's how I want to have my components look, I wasn't aware that it's going to be so hard to do, because like you have certain constraints when you say just return one widget, which is that only render objects can have multiple children. Like if you have a stateless component, a stateless widget in Flutter, that's not a render object. But if you have something like a column that has its own render object and does its own layouting logic.
Yep.
And that's the first constraint. And then the second constraint is that you always have a leaf, like your leaf node is always a render object.
Okay.
If you think like if you want to render nothing in Flutter, you always have to put like a size box.shrink.
Yeah. Yep.
You can't not return anything. Those two constraints make it reasonably okay to deal with like updating children and all like whatever happens in the background in the framework. When you like rerun a build method, something changes, you have to update it and re-render that. It's reasonably okay to figure out what changed and in what way and make it efficient. In Jaspr, those two constraints are totally void. Like you don't have any component can have multiple children, and here I could also like not return anything. So it's a stateless. It could be a stateless component with no children. So you also have like a leaf component which is not a render object. So that made it really complex. And yeah.
Interesting. I think we should get into some. Oh gosh, I could talk about the architecture and like how you built this forever. I think we'll save some of these questions that I have. Like,
yeah. I mean, if people are interested in that, I just gave a talk like a week back at Flutter and Friends about that topic. It's not out yet, but it is recorded and will be come out in maybe a month or so.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed seeing you at Flutter and Friends, by the way. Yes. That was what a conference. If you've not been to Flutter and Friends before, you gotta go. Let me just say. All right. And Randall's kind of spoiling it here. It is technically already out because the whole live stream has been published, but it's not isolated. But you can watch every talk from Flutter and Friends right now. All right. So there's other kind of high level things. Obviously, the first question that I starred in the chat, and by the way, folks are asking good questions and I'm starring them. So I'm not ignoring your good questions. Raheem, right out of the gate, does it have SEO? So there's a lot of kind of high-level developer-facing details about Jaspr that I think would be good to cover real quick, and then maybe we can start building something and show what it's like to kick the tires with it. So, Kilian, SEO, tell us.
Yes.
What's the story with Jaspr?
So the story is basically you can do everything that you can do with a normal website. So you can do any SEO tactic, strategy, whatever that you can do with normal websites. So one thing, like just the fact that it renders HTML is like, okay, nice for SEO. The other thing, or like one additional other thing is that it does server-side rendering. So you can pre-render your site as HTML on the server and immediately send that back to the user, which has your content as like the first HTML that is received from the server. If you know from Flutter, when you load like a Flutter Web app, you first get this initial white page.
Yep.
Which is shown as long as kind of the JavaScript loads, and only when the JavaScript and everything else is loaded, then Flutter can begin to render your application, and only then it is shown. But with server-side rendering, you have it kind of immediately there because it's all pre-rendered on the server.
Yeah.
And this is also kind of great for SEO because it makes it for like search engines a lot easier to view your content. It's always a discussion like, by now, search engines are probably smart enough to run some amount of JavaScript. But from what I've seen and read so far, there are still like things that make it seem like as it would still influence your SEO score. So server-side rendering is probably always still better.
Yeah. It's funny. The tech just keeps going in circles. I always think of that, the meme where Frodo says to Sam, "Oh, Sam, we're going in circles. We've been here before." Originally, the web was only server-side rendering. The browser would send a GET request to the server. The server would probably have an HTML file sitting there, which is also another bit of full circleness where now static sites are exciting again. And before those just used to be websites. But whether the HTML file is sitting there on disk or in memory or has to be computed and rendered on the fly by either Node or Python or Ruby or Java code, whatever, it would send a fully formed HTML document to the server, and then the server would, or to the client, and then the client would render it in the browser. And then as websites got more and more interactive, and this is a little bit of a history lesson if you're a web developer, you've heard all this. If Flutter is your main framework so far in your career, then maybe some of this will actually be interesting. Then as websites got more and more interactive, there emerged this really annoying kind of handoff that you would have to do between the initial HTML that the server rendered, and then a bunch of JavaScript would have to take over and breathe life into this page that a user might interact with. And you'd have to keep that code in really tight sync. And this problem emerged long before Node really was a thing. So it was basically just Java, PHP, Python, and Ruby were the server-side languages. They were kind of passing the baton to this client-side JavaScript. And that was pretty annoying and had all these convoluted solutions for it. One of which was to just say, forget server-side rendering at all. I'm not going to do anything there. I'm going to handle all the rendering on the front end. And that trend led to React, but had literally dozens of libraries before React that were attempting the same thing. Anyway, but then that created SEO problems because at first Google's crawler and any other crawler, and of course there are others, were just like, well, that's interesting that you keep shipping a blank page. Weird, but I guess you could do that. And this is how we got into the current conversation. So with Jaspr, what you're saying is, and all web technologies these days, whether it's Next.js or React with its own server-side rendering or whatever you use, have to have some kind of way to render something on the server first if they want that top tier SEO opinion from Google and other crawlers. You got to render something on the server, and then you have to kind of elegantly pass the baton to the client-side JavaScript. So it basically assumes control of the DOM and then starts cooking as the user clicks stuff and takes different actions. And Jaspr is participating in that whole song and dance. So you're saying you've got server-side rendering, and then obviously all the dark code that we write on the client side has to take over and drive the page and the UI and handle navigation and everything from there. Is that anything that you would add to that summary of how the heck the web, technology space got to where we are?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great summary, great history lesson. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, to add to that is, if you are coming from Flutter and are not familiar with all the stuff that Craig just said, like this isn't Jaspr specific. This is general web concept. So if you want to learn about general server-side rendering, hydration, which is the word for that kind of picking up on the client after the server-side rendering, it makes sense to kind of get familiar with these concepts first in a general sense, and then look at how Jaspr does it.
Yep. All right. There were other questions that folks had. Randall was asking about, there's some server pod and Jaspr stuff. I know you two announced an integration recently. Very cool. So this is some of the stuff that we've just been hitting on: client side, server side, SSR, that's server side rendering, and proxy objects. I actually don't know what Randall means here by proxy objects. Kilian, do you know what that is?
I don't actually know, no.
Okay, Randall, please clarify. What is a proxy object? What other questions do we have here? Oh, and then element embedding in Jaspr. This is, I know, possible. I don't think we're going to play with it today, but you can put full Flutter Web stuff in a Jaspr app, right?
Yes. And it's a super nice way because, again, it's both Dart. So with normal Flutter embedding, you have to do, like, if you want to share state or do something between website and Flutter, you have to like do JavaScript interop and set it up in a certain way. With Jaspr, it's the same code base, so you don't have to do any of that stuff. And you just, with the help of like an integration package I did, kind of just return a widget from a component. And this will then embed the Flutter app in your Jaspr site.
I see. All right, we've got clarification on what a proxy object is. It's where you have JavaScript code running client side that hydrates to server side running a Dart app. That is proxy objects. I'm still not 100% sure exactly what that means, other than a typical web app where client side code is asking. Does this mean? So one of the old patterns was a client might make a request to the server, like some AJAX request, and typically what was mostly happening in the web is that the server would return some just JSON or something, and then the client side would interpret that and figure out what to render in light of the data that came back. But actually, I remember Facebook did this for a long time. It was a huge way that they ensured such great performance on Facebook.com back in the 2009 era. They would just have the server return raw HTML, just return a string, and the client would plop it right into place. I wonder, is that what he means? Or Kilian, do you have any other ideas?
I'm not super sure. I'm thinking he's touching on hydration, where like you have your server-side rendered HTML, which when it's arriving in the browser picks it up and transforms it into the DOM tree, which is like the internal tree of nodes, of HTML nodes. And then when you run start up your website on the client, you don't want to recreate everything. You don't want to recreate every HTML element. Instead, you want to kind of say, oh, attach. Now the user, attach. Like the user wants to render a button, but there is already a button, so that's great. We're going to use it. We're just going to attach the click handler.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what hydration does.
Yeah. All right. Do you think it's time for us to build something with Jaspr, or do we have any more? Okay. All right. So let me get my screen set up because I'll be doing the typing here. I installed Jaspr on my computer an hour ago, and it was very easy. And I'll pull up the Jaspr docs again. Oh, that what button did I just hit?
Oh, interesting. That's a broken link in the package. I've recently updated the docs. I guess I didn't update that link to the docs.
Okay, I didn't realize I clicked anything. In my mind, I was just pressing Command plus, and then all of a sudden, maybe I brushed the trackpad on accident or something, and the cursor was in a weird spot. Okay, so Jaspr, a lot of stuff we've just been talking about here. Blah, 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 blah. Really great docs. Love it. This is what I ran earlier. Get started. I had not installed Jaspr before. I'm completely ignorant, other than what you've heard me say so far. But I ran that an hour ago, and then I created the hello world of Jaspr, which is, of course, a counter app, as is tradition. And I have that sitting in this tab right here. So this is what you get out of the gate with Jaspr. Love that the logo is a Dart and Flutter themed doggo.
It's my doggo, actually.
Nice. What's your dog's name?
Jaspr.
Incredible. That's the best. I love it. What a cute looking dog, by the way, in your GitHub and other
Thanks.
profile pictures.
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, that warms my heart. And then we have ready to go the created project, and we're VS Code live sharing. So we're gonna build some stuff in here, and that's all you missed. It was running these two commands and then opening it in VS Code and starting a live share, and now we're ready to go. All right. I'm excited. And we decided in advance, and by that I mean also 1 hour ago, that we were going to build a clone of Hacker News using the Hacker News API. What is this? Some news.y combinator or something? Yeah. So obviously very rich UI here, incredibly robust. There's got to be a million lines of CSS to pull this together. Oh, I'm actually really excited to hear, the web uses CSS. Very different than how Flutter works. I'm excited to see just how we style stuff in Jaspr. I literally don't even know. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this. But this is what we're building. And we're going to do it via this API that I was just poking around with for a second via the documentation. I'll make this a little bigger. And yeah, it's time to get started here. Any final thoughts before we start typing?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So I guess first we'll have a very quick tour of what we've got. You can point me in the direction of where new files should be added, what you recommend, and then we'll do it. So to start, when you run Jaspr create, you get a lib and a web directory. And lib we're all familiar with. Is web like the build? What goes in? What's the web directory?
Web is it's all the static assets that you have. So those get all just deployed as is if you host it somewhere. So yeah, images, fonts, icons, whatever. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's not the build directory, it's the assets directory. Love it. Got it. This Dart, so we got a pub spec like normal. Yeah. We don't have to list the web directory you see here because that is for Dart specific asset mechanics, but the web has solved that problem differently. So we don't have to list the web directory here. That's worth noting. Okay, now we're in the lib directory. And in here, there is components, constants, pages, and then a couple more files. What highlights would you point us at amongst these files?
Let's start with the main.dart.
Okay, main.dart.
Yeah,
great call.
So this is the entry point, obviously, but it's not the client entry point because we selected server mode for this, which means we do server-side rendering. And if you do server-side rendering, then you always start at the server. Just because, like, time-wise, it happens first. Like, you first do server-side rendering, then it's shipped to the client, then at some point you do client-side rendering. So our actual entry point is on the server.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, I see some styling stuff here. A little hint of what's about to happen. All right, so in here, we've got run app. That's typical as well. You probably are using your own run app. Yeah, this is not coming from Flutter. So run app, this is Jaspr specific. It's returning a document. This would be the equivalent of Material app or Cupertino or Widgets app. It does already feel very familiar, and that is pretty cool. I see a pure Dart API for CSS. Great. And then we run the app here. So that's probably an app.dart.
Exactly. So couple of things if we stay in main.dart. So
Okay.
You've seen like there's CSS in there. So conceptually, we do need to write and think about CSS, but syntactically, it's all in Dart. So I've built a kind of Dart wrapper, like classes and stuff around CSS. And so you define it in Dart, and this then gets rendered to CSS.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just scanning chat real quick here. There's been some pretty good questions. Folks, I'm starring your good questions. So, Nimesh, you're asking if it has SEO support. Looks like you just tuned in. Yes, we just covered that. Scrub back in the timeline and you'll hear all the details.
I'm seeing, does Jaspr have UI components? Which the answer to is not yet. So it's just a thing that will come for sure at some point, maybe even from the community.
Now, what would prevent? Why does what if I just put material.css in my DOM and I manually add the appropriate classes to the appropriate DOM elements? Then I have it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that also would, I believe, answer this question. Can you use Tailwind for styling? You just add tailwind.css and add the classes to your elements that you're building, and then you're using Tailwind.
Yep. There's actually a Jaspr Tailwind integration.
Oh, great. So it's even more direct than that. But had there not been, you could still do that, right?
You could still do that, yes. And use also any other CSS framework that you want to.
Yeah, wouldn't even know how to prevent you from doing that. That's the glory of HTML and CSS, maligned as they are by some, not me. I love them both. Yeah, you put a CSS file in your HTML file and then use those classes in your DOM elements and you are up and running. So pretty cool. All right. So you were saying, we've got to write this CSS stuff and this gets kind of compiled into actual raw CSS. Oh, and let's take a look at that. We were talking about this earlier. So in the browser here, I'm showing localhost 8080, which is where everything is being run because I've run Jaspr serve right there. So now everything is running on 8080 locally for me. And I've pulled that up. So here we are looking at the website. And if I in Chrome press Command Option U, well, that's on a Mac, then I'll be looking at the view source page. And no matter how big I make this, the address bar does not get bigger. Sorry. Anyway, here we see the actual guts behind our website. And lo and behold, actual CSS, which is definitely the point of Jaspr. And the website itself is not one canvas, which is how Flutter achieves all of the Flutter magic, but is instead a DOM, which is how the rest of the web works. So there it is. And we can see, as we poke around in our components and in the app and whatnot, we'll see the relics. We'll see the code that ended up turning into these things. And interestingly, because we selected server-side rendering, like you said, this was generated on the server, aka this process running on my computer. And this HTML that we're looking at, this DOM, is what arrived at the browser initially. We haven't had to do any work to change this, which means any search engine crawler, Google or Bing or any other one, will be able to read this like any other website. And in fact, will probably not have any idea that Jaspr was ever involved. Yeah, I see no indication of it. Maybe there's some
if you closely look at the Dart.js, but other than that, it's all the same.
Right. Okay, so that's kind of where we're starting. This is just stock web technology, for better or worse. And if you are using Jaspr, presumably you've concluded that for your project, it's for better. So great. All right. We've now, so that's main.dart. All right, I think we're ready to move on here.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at this. Abdullah, in love.
Nice.
We really do not understand how long they've been waiting for this. Great. That's, well, That's got to just make Kilian feel wonderful. What's the JS overhead for Hello World comparing Jaspr to a Flutter Web app? So I'm guessing here we're going to talk about client-side rendering, because for server-side rendering, that overhead should be 0. But what's your answer to this, Kilian?
So you don't have obviously all the canvas, all the Skia stuff. Just the raw JavaScript build is smaller just because the Jaspr framework code base is smaller than the Flutter code base, I think. And it does less stuff. And also it's smaller because we're going to look at that later, but when you do server-side rendering and then hydration and then client-side rendering, you don't need to ship the whole app to the client. If you for our counter app, only the counter needs to be interactive here. So we only need to ship the code for the counter component to the client, and the rest we don't need to ship. So like the app component isn't even shipped to the client. So that makes it also smaller, the bundle and the JavaScript. Craig? Should I just take over and...
Oh, I'm freaking muted again. Oh my God. That's why you said, should I take over? How am I hitting this button? This is crazy. Oh no. Hey, good to see you. Okay, you'd think I'd be good at live streaming. This is the 50th episode. I've built no skills at all. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was scrolled up in chat looking at these questions people have been asking, which are very good questions.
Mhm.
And that's why I didn't see you all saying, he's muted. Well, one day I'll learn how to live stream. But today is not that day. So good questions here. And this, not surprising, if someone has built Flutter, if someone has just built UIs with Flutter, which is of course totally okay, then how the web works normally might be new to you. And so someone asked the question, oh yeah, so Tyler, welcome, love you. You said, so Tailwind parses the Jaspr classes. And this I think is worth diving into to really understand exactly what is going on here. And Kilian, you can either take this or I can take it to kind of explain, to recap how browsers work.
Go ahead, and then I add something.
Okay, sounds good. I'll try not to mute myself in the middle of my answer. So browsers receive this resource here that's on the screen, all of this CSS and then the DOM. And it's their job, it's the browser's job to match the different DOM types here. So this would be a div that has the active class within a nav, within a header, and then apply this styling to anything that satisfies these requirements. And that is then, so it understands all of the different rules that could be applied to the DOM. And then it reads the DOM and it looks for, any divs that have the active class that are within a nav, within a header, and they get position relative. And so that is just how CSS and the DOM come together to render something. But on that comment, so Tailwind parses the Jaspr classes. Tailwind as a CSS library it's a bunch of CSS, and it doesn't do any parsing because CSS is just styling rules. You could basically think of CSS as your Flutter theme, but that theme is just a static dead object. It's like a manifest for how stuff might look given certain conditions. And then the browser is what's doing the parsing. And specifically, then also you say about Tailwind parsing Jaspr classes. Tailwind supplies what classes to use. Jaspr then, if you wanted to use Tailwind, your Jaspr components must use the appropriate classes that are from Tailwind. So Tailwind never knows anything about Jaspr. Tailwind never knows anything about anything. It says, I offer these sets of rules on these classes, and I recommend you combine them in this way in your DOM. And it's up to you to do that. And then the browser mixes and matches everything, applies the rules, and then you get the look that Tailwind promised that you would get.
So
any thoughts on that, Kilian?
Yes. So that's with like Tailwind has a bunch of pre-configured classes, but then there is like the Tailwind compiler that goes over all your code and optimizes the output CSS and throws out all the classes you don't use. So it actually reads your files. So if Tailwind has like thousands of classes, but you only use 2, then it will compile that, and like this output CSS file will only contain those 2 classes.
That's very cool.
Which gives you a super optimized CSS file. And that works with Jaspr, with Dart, with pretty much anything, because the Tailwind compiler doesn't care at all about what language it is. It just kind of reads the file as a string and just searches in the string for the class names. So it works with JavaScript files, works with Dart files out of the box.
Well, that's cool, man. I learned this today. Thank you, Tyler and Kilian, I didn't know that Tailwind had that smart of a build step for tree shaking. That's sick.
Yeah, true.
That's super cool.
It's tree shaking for CSS classes.
And now, Tyler, your original question makes a lot more sense. Great, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to actually build something here instead of just talk about how the web works. So this is Hello World, and we need to start throwing together some stuff for
let's go in app.dart because that one also contains the router, and I've seen some questions in the chat about routing.
Yes. I was going to ask that myself as well. Yeah.
So there's a Jaspr router package, which is used here. And this has a API that is quite similar to Go router. So you have router, you have routes, and you configure everything through these routes. Have a builder. And,
now, what if I wanted to have routes that looks like this is kind of combining both the rendering of routing and the actual available routes? Is that right? And if so, what if I wanted to have routes that are reachable, but not because they're in the main nav?
What do you mean with not in the main nav?
Well, let's say I have, we're going to build a clone of Hacker News. So / some date, some slug is going to be a valid route, but this route is not going to be. Actually, it looks like this is just a link to an external thing. Pretend we are still in Hacker News.
You can click comments, I think.
Yeah, perfect. There we go. So this is a route, but it's not.
You can use URL parameters, of course, if you have like an ID or something in there.
But /item wouldn't make sense to have /item with like, this route shouldn't exist in the nav, and yet it is a valid route. Did that make sense?
I mean, I think it depends on how you configure your routes in the code base. It shouldn't be a problem.
All right. Well,
I think we have to soon. Remember that we are still on the server, so this routing also happens server side.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's add. Let's do this. I'm going to add item right now, and then we'll. So I don't know. We'll call it item, and we'll add a new thing that doesn't exist yet. So this should complain. And we've got CSS, that's fine. All right, so in pages, I'm guessing, this is where we had about, so I'm going to rename this to item. And I'll change this to item everywhere. I guess it's just those two spots. We don't have anything yet, so I'm going to just delete all of this. Yield, we'll yield a div for now. Oh, do I have to put something in it?
You have to put an empty list because it has like a positional children parameter.
Got it. Cool. We'll leave these styles. That's fine. All right. So what I'm wondering now is item, it should be a route, right? / item is obviously super valid in this app that we're making, but it doesn't really belong in the nav, right? You find it elsewhere around the UI by clicking on specific things or clicking on comments or whatnot. Like if I remove this, I still want / item to be real. It's just not in the nav anymore. Does it stay real because it's in / pages?
Do you mean the nav that is shown on the homepage?
Yes.
That is kind of separate. So if you can add the route begin and then go to the header component.
Okay. Here we go. Yep.
And this one has it just in there. Yeah.
Okay. So this is truly just kind of a disembodied floating. Oh, interesting. Because
this is just functional.
I see. It's sitting next to UI made me think it was what was drawing the UI. I understand now. Okay. So now we just change this to item and item as well. And here you're, setting the active one. Cool. Okay. All right. So first thing that I think we need to do is make a network request and get some of this data. Where would you recommend we do that? Add a new folder for data or something?
Actually, no, because this is an interesting one. We don't need to kind of in Flutter. You would have to handle your request and your loading state and all that. As we are doing server-side rendering here, we don't need a loading state. We just need to fetch the data and then render them out while we are still in the server-side rendering. And then it's like immediately returned to the client.
Okay.
So maybe we start at the homepage and get the
load them here.
Get the overview of all available items.
Okay. Now we could basically do this in an it state, I'm guessing, right? Call a method here and load the things.
The thing
or
is
in build, probably.
Yeah, because we need to wait with the build until the data is loaded. So I would here go in first, make this a.
So make it a stream. Because we need to
make it a stateless component first.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Make it a stateless component. So I should get rid of the create state and all this stuff? Okay.
Keep the build method, but yeah.
Okay.
The init state you also don't need.
Stateless. Oh, I got rid of component. That isn't what I intended to have happen. Component. Yep. Get rid of init state. Goodbye. All right. So we just have our build. And
then if you click on stateless component, like put your cursor on it and do command dot, there you have a convert to async stateless component.
Ooh.
So I've actually released today a new linting package for Jaspr, which comes with a few lints and a few code assists. And yeah, this is the async stateless component, which allows you to write async build methods.
Great.
Which is maybe super confusing or like weird concept to do, like putting await calls in the build method.
I meant to put these here, of course. So this is what we had before, iterable and sync, and now we have stream and async. And for anyone who is like, huh? I would recommend watching the very old but still accurate Asynchrony in Dart miniseries on YouTube. Predates my time on the team. I think it's 5 episodes. You will come out understanding exactly what's going on here. Okay, so we've made this change. But it's stateless. That's fine. We can just make the network request right in here.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So this will be final items equals await load items, which is a method that will shortly exist. And this will return a list of item objects that will add load items.
Future, actually.
Of course. Yes. Thank you. All right, item needs to exist. So where I don't really want to define that class here. Should I make like a models folder? Do you recommend that?
Do you want to make like a class and pass a JSON to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Models folder, I think makes sense.
New folder, models, new file, item, dirt. Okay. Class, item. I'm not going to use any code gen or anything. I think we can just do this faster without it, even though it's, I wonder, are there any like online Dart data class generator? I wonder if we can like give something a YAML file. Oh, there is this extension.
I think there's a VS Code plugin.
Yeah, I'll try that. I wonder what is the syntax that we have to give it. So we just write this. Yeah. All right. I've not really used this much before, but I'm using it today. So it's called the data class generator. So let's add that extension data class generator. It looks like a shit. Look at the one with the most downloads. You love to see it. Okay. So this is class item. Now to figure out what goes in this class, we'll look at the API documentation. We're not going to worry. We're not going to get to comments, I don't imagine. So we can just, well, we need the ID. So that'll be final int ID. Then we need type, I guess. That enum sounds a little confusing. Don't care.
Probably just text and yeah. I think they have also a URL.
Time, sure. In Unix time, so this is probably an int. And then we've got obviously text. That one's pretty important. And then URL and title. So let's do those. It was text, URL, and title. And this is probably good for now. So this will be final string. Okay. Now we use the plugin. Rip. I'm going to close some other stuff here.
I mean, we could also use Start Mappable if you want to.
I don't remember changing this, but yeah, go away. All right, item. Huh. I'm going to reload. Oh, I might kill this stream or I might kill the live share. All right, what does Dart Mappable do?
It's another package of mine. So it does serialization and data classes. Yeah.
Okay. Is it code gen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because I would not do code gen, but it's your package, so we'll do it.
So the nice thing is that Jaspr Serve does run build runner because it needs it internally, so you don't need to run it yourself.
You smart man.
That's already.
So do I even need to do this? I probably don't, huh?
No, that's we already.
And do I need this? I probably do. Yeah, that one we need. Cool. Well, cool. So we're going to add this. And then we're going to add this. And then we're going to add this. With mappable.
Yes.
All right. As that one actor in Hollywood would say.
Constructor.
All right. All right. So for that one, we need to add all the things. Does this can handle positional or named, I'm guessing?
Yeah, any.
Cool. So we will say, let's see how quickly I can do this. So I think it was 6 and 6. All right. So let's go highlight all the finals and then go to the end and grab each of those things. And now I'll highlight all of the this is and go to the end and highlight and paste. Oh, and then to the beginning, required. It's mad about something. Oh, because my class isn't real. Look at that. Who said it's all about working smarter, not harder? Okay, so now if we run Jaspr serve, this should all get built out, right?
Yeah.
I probably just needed to restart VS Code to get the other plugin to work, but that would have interrupted the live share. Cool. All right. I haven't looked at chat in a long time. Goodness. I didn't mute myself. What a win. What a win. Abdullah agrees. Me not muting myself is epic. Apparently I was talking about dynamic routes or something. Or dynamic links. I used to be a web developer for 10 plus years, and now I have barely looked at or thought about the web since I started getting into Flutter. So all my web info is old, as we've already seen, as I've been explaining a simpler version of Tailwind. All right, the build is done. This didn't hit. Let's see.
I guess the file name, you have to say item.mapper.
Oh, goodness. Oh, but it still did generate it. Cool. And then this needs to be item mappable. Yeah. Copy paste errors. You'll love them. Okay, cool. We have an item. So now let's import item from models.item or / you know what I meant. Oh, we need the HTTP library. Is that already available to me? Or do I have to add it?
Have to add it.
Okay. I'm going to get a new tab here. Flutter pub add HTTP.
Probably Dart pub. Oh, it works.
Yeah, I was actually, I copy and pasted that and then was wondering, like, is this going to work? And it did when I added these. So, but I had the same question. All right, so now we have HTTP. That's cool. So in home, I will add HTTP. I don't know how the alphabet works. I think HTTP goes here. All right. So in this one, we will say http.get, and we'll await. But we're going to give that the URI.parse of the latest. Oh, yeah, actually. Oh, we do have a little bit of juggling to do here. So URI.parse. Oh, as a string. Okay, so this will be final IDs, essentially, but then probably like to JSON. Is that a thing? It's not going to be the IDs. It's going to be the response. And then we have to pull out the IDs. .body probably. And then we have to JSON. Yeah, it's coming in as this full JSON string. So that's from what? Dart convert?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that is JSON decode. All right. We have the IDs. Let's run it and print the IDs.
You have to do one modification. The class home is annotated right now.
Class home is annotated. Okay.
You have to remove that.
Okay, I'm going to read this helpful comment you left. By using the client annotation, this component will be automatically compiled to JavaScript and mounted on the client. Therefore, this file and any imported file must be compilable for both the server and client environments. And is what you're saying here that something I just did made it not compilable for both?
The async status component, yeah, that's only available on the server because on the client we can't have async build functions.
Got it.
Which, yeah, so we can't do that, render that on the client.
Okay. So great. Separately, and maybe or maybe not relevantly, this component and any child components will be built once on the server during pre-rendering and then again on the client during normal rendering, which is no longer applicable because that was not a requirement for the client annotation. It was an implication of the client annotation. All right, we're printing the IDs. We're getting these items that do nothing. And because I added a package, this needs to be a hard restart. All right, I'm excited. Returning to the chat. Oh, there were some other things. QuickType, apparently, another way to make a package. Oh, we've got an error here. So is there something else about that homepage being client-ish that like elsewhere something was depending on or assuming?
I'm not sure. So this is part of like what the client annotation does. So removing it should not give that. Maybe it's using build runner underneath. Maybe there is like something cached that's not properly updated.
Yeah, maybe. It's still cooking. It didn't crash yet, so we'll see.
It could be in an endless loop. You can do stop that, do Jaspr clean, and then.
Great. I was wondering if there was a clean. Now, welcome to the halting problem. All right, we'll try to serve again. Problems are the only way you know a live demo is legit. That's... Wait, someone says rename the constructor to item. Oh, I think we did that, right? They were saying that before, back when this still said my class. Yeah, thank you, Manish. 10 points to House Gryffindor. Did I make the appropriate gesture towards Mountain View? That's my surroundings right now. All right, we're taking a second to render again, or to serve, to build. Interesting. Wait a minute. I have an item data class and an item component. I don't know if that has caused a problem yet, but I know that I don't want to continue doing that. Anyway, well, whatever, it worked. I'll change the name of one of these in a second. So back to here, refresh, cool. So, oh, right. So these were the IDs that built, and would I expect this print statement to run just on build or on every request?
It should be on every request because it does server-side rendering for every request.
Oh, of course. Right. This is not a static site. Right. Okay, cool. Here are all the IDs. Look at us. We know how to make a network request. Yeah, we're pretty advanced developers here. We know how to make a network request. Okay. So don't wanna wow anyone, but hold on to your hats. All right, so we've got these IDs. And now the next one, and I wonder if there's like a bulk. Here we go. So I don't want to make 1,000 network requests to get basic information about them. Is there a place where I can give like a comma separated? So we've got Visa. What is the difference between these? I don't even know what's going on here. Via item, the thing.json.
I think they're different types of posts.
Oh, so this
that should be on the same format. Yeah.
You're right. All right. Is there a way to get more than one at a time, please? I don't want to make 100 requests. I think we have to make 100 requests.
I think so.
Boo. All right. Who designed this API anyway?
I think they say on top that it's Firebase. So I guess they just return the collections itself and don't do any joins.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what's the most reasonable way for us to do this? I guess. Well, I'm gonna make a.
I would say future.wait.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, do we want to send off all of these? I mean, ideally, we'd probably do like 10, and
We
then
can
we
do
might.
10, yeah.
Oh, but this is interesting, right? So that's what's going to happen on the server. And then we need to use hydration to kind of implement the infinite scroll to pick up on the client and have it load
Mhm.
further ones. That's actually, I
Mhm.
don't know if we're going to get to that in this stream, but I think that would be super interesting
That
to explore.
definitely, yeah, that would be an interesting thing to do.
All right, so let's try to load 10 as fast as we can. So int counter equals 0, while counter is less than 10, counter plus plus, and then we'll have our futures, final futures. I really want to get to exploring this use case, so I'm going to type fast finally for the first time in the history of observable Flutter. So here we'll do uri.parse, and this is going to go in an http.get. Oh, actually, that was fine. And so here we'll say futures.add. Okay, and then the URI that we're going to parse is this one minus the pretty print. And then the ID goes here. So this would be IDs at index counter. And then we can get rid of this URL parameter. All right, so now we're going to load.
I think you have a comma at the end that's in the string.
Good eye. Thank you. Oh, right. I meant to put it here. No, that looks better. All right, so we've got all of our futures. And now at the end of the list, we can say await future dot, what is it? Future dot wait. And then this gets the futures. Oh, this is a future of type response. Oh, http dot response probably. There we go. Okay, so now the futures can go in here, and this will be the final responses. And now we say for final response in responses. This is really ugly code. But what I want to get at is the handing off of the baton from the client to the server. So I don't really care about this code. So now we're going to load some items. So first we need the data. Final data equals response. I'm not even checking if it's 200. Nothing. Don't care. Long hair. Don't care. JSON decode. We get the thing. And then we need to add some items. Final items equals item. Still don't know how we've escaped having a problem with the component and the model having the same class name. One day that's going to explode in our faces. Items.add item dot from.
So you do item mapper dot from from map.
JSON. Got it.
So from JSON would get the string. If we parse it manually, you do from map. Like it's a different naming than JSON CLI as well.
Got it. Cool. So data.
Yeah.
Lovely. And now we have some items. And so we just return those items. And now down here, we can actually use some items. So you'll love to see it for item in items. So let's yield, because that is the Jaspr way. I think a section makes sense. And let's give this a p tag with the item.title.
So you have to do a p, make the list, like list as children again, and then do text. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because it always have to accept components, and then there's like the text component that just prints out text.
Got it. Okay. And I'm not going to worry. Let's go back to, we're not going to match this too closely. I'll just say by the name. That'll be the only other thing we do here. So another p tag, and this will say text of, actually we can just interpolate here probably. So this will be author, no, by. By. There we go. And we need a comma. And then we're going to get rid of all this. Okay, this is going to work.
Let's try it.
Let's get rid of the print statement. Where the heck was that? Did I already get rid of it? I think I already got rid of it. Okay. So is this just going to work? Make you smaller? Oh, up here. There we go. Refresh. I did this on the... Oh, nice. It errored. Good stuff. Okay. Apparently, I didn't use a text thing correctly or something. Failed to decode text. Oh, this is in mappable.
Scroll right. Yeah. Can you scroll? Like what comes after that?
No. VS Code's terminal is being weird. I can run Jaspr serve in an actual terminal. Let's try that. Actual terminal to the rescue.
Maybe it's nullable, like the property, and it's like null.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Jaspr serve. This I think will tell us. So what? Will Jaspr solve SEO problems with Flutter Web? It offers a strong SEO solution, as strong as any other website. You love to see it, don't you? So does this not use Flutter widgets? No, but you can embed Flutter in it. All right, we're just going to refresh here, get that internal server error, which was in the thingamathing. Parameter text is missing. Okay, so nullable fields, models, item. There we go. So text is going to become a nullable string. Presumably, none of the other ones can be nullable. Who knows? Maybe by is. We'll do that as well. It's funny, we're not even using text. This doesn't matter at all. It's a giant waste of time. Oh, wait, where's the... Here we are. Okay, rebuild. What other questions we got? Guys and gals, we don't learn Flutter and make a mobile app. Great, love to hear it. But I started Google and watch video that Flutter is dying and KMP is the new thing. Oh, what do you think? I literally clicked on this before reading any of it. No, I don't think Flutter's dying because here we are. KMP is cool though. If you love Kotlin, you should use KMP. If you love Dart, you should use Flutter. And that's that. And that's all I have to say about that. Refresh here. Okay, another server error. Good, good, good. What did we get this time? URL is missing. They're all becoming nullable. I don't know how any of this works. Apparently, this is not a serious API. Maybe even ID is not reliable. Who knows?
I feel like that at least should be right.
Yeah, now we will, of course, need to go back into our build and account for the fact that we're going to be throwing these, we'll need like or empty string and or anonymous maybe. Actually, let's not put an empty string here. Let's say like missing title. Also emitting some HTML. So we're going to test the escaping implementation. Okay, here we go. Refresh. Oh, it worked. Good stuff. Now, also, I'm being reminded that we should probably put this in a UL and wrap all these in an LI. So I happened to notice, you showed me before we started here, UL. Oh, no. Oh, so I actually want to wrap these in just an LI, and then I want to yield a UL before, but I need the closing UL after. How do I do that?
You yield the UL and then put the for loop in the list.
Oh, well, okay, wait, sorry. So we yield the UL, and then I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yeah. So what
no multi-yield for us today.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So what I want to do instead here is say we'll have our elements, I guess. And instead of yielding, this is going to be elements.add.
Well, you could do the for loop in the list.
I know, but Wait, why didn't this work? Oh, probably because it doesn't know. There we are. All right. This should look better. So we have, I'm going to bring, next time this crashes, we're going to bring it back into the, oh, what a beautiful website.
I want to point out that the crash wasn't by Jaspr.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was not from Jaspr. It was from, and it wasn't even from Mapper. It was from me not seriously reading.
Let's say it was from the API, not being good documented.
Yeah. Also, it may have been really well documented. I didn't read it, the documentation, so I don't know. Okay, let's add some CSS. I want to do list style none and get rid of these dots. So where would I put a little CSS for this?
If you click on the UL
In the
code.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and do the code. Yes, and there's an add styles.
Sure is. Oh, that's so good. Okay.
So it adds a class for you, and if you scroll down, it also adds a little CSS snippet, and then you can in the CSS part.
Yeah.
This is like, so you add CSS properties by chaining different groups. So there's a box group, which has a few properties. There's a text group, a background group, just to like semantically group a few of those properties.
I see.
There's also the list group, which we should use.
Is what we want. Cool. List. Okay. And I'm going to command click into this. And here it is, list style. So style is going to get list style dot none. Oh, so good. Okay. So you're now rebuilding. And then we come here and we refresh. Uh-oh. Maybe it didn't finish. Okay. Let's check this out. So I really should be using so we have class equals class name.
Should be, and then the CSS should have that somewhere.
Yeah, no, it didn't appear. Interesting. Right? Yeah. So that CSS didn't make its way into, did I do it? Do we do anything wrong here? Dot class name. This dot is actually kind of a little, oh no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's like a CSS selector. You can do class names and other stuff.
Don't put it here. Do put it here. Yeah. All right, a little unexpected there, but that's okay. We'll leave that as an exercise for after the stream. Maybe a little, someone can file an issue on GitHub.
Let me.
While you're doing that, I'm going to bring our compilation back into VS Code.
No, sir.
Sorry, I was just reading some chat. What with
I think you can try closing the Jaspr options.dart file, because that one is auto-generated.
It keeps opening, and I'm not sure why.
Does it open automatically? That's weird.
Yeah, oh, look at this. There's actually just a syntax error. So I wonder if I've moved one of these things into like a weird, well, okay, that's the problem. I wonder if I've moved one of my, so home. Oh,
can you just delete that line? Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, and then there's no comma on this one. Okay, so yeah, something silly happened. So now if we refresh, I'm still doing view source here. Class name does appear. That's cool. So now they should be gone, and they are gone. Interesting. Something funny is going on. Jaspr options is opening on its own. I'm not clicking it. And then we obviously saw that error was there. It may have opened because there was an error. I don't know. But something funky happened.
But yeah, that's generated. You don't need to touch it normally for the viewers.
All right. So now I want to maybe let's put a little styling on this because it's unbelievably awful.
I guess we can also delete the header.
Yeah, true. So in the home,
it's an app, I think.
oh, cool. Yeah, not doing better. Bye. So where did the home even get used? Oh, it's from this builder, I guess. Okay. So now we refresh here. That should be gone. Nice. Love it. All right. Yeah, I want to add a little container with some light background color and some padding. I want to do really basic web things and see how easy it is. So that would go on, yeah. Oh, item.dart is the stateless component.
Do you want to like modify the existing ones?
I don't remember. Oh, this was a page, and this is nothing. We don't care about this yet, and we don't need styles. I can close that. I can close app. Okay, yes, it's in home.dart because that's where we're returning this. Right, here we go. And I'm going to do add style again. Add styles. Class name.
I think you have to change the class name now.
Sure will. Sure will. So this will be a news item. And that is from here. And so let's do in the box, I want to add, some padding. So padding edge insets. Edge insets dot all 10. I don't know.
And then you have to do .px. So because you have different units, pixels, and other stuff in CSS.
EM, right. Goodness. Whoa. Hadn't thought of that. Now we need a background color. Oh, border radius. Yeah.
That's a separate
not
group.
in box. Okay. What group is it in? Oh, background. Would you look at that? Background. Color. Colors dot gray. And let's do like a really light one.
Just a name.
Okay. Also, there's no light gray. Cool. There we go. I need padding and I need margin. Honestly, that's really what I wanted. I'm gonna do margin as well. Okay, here we go. Refresh. Wow, that looks good. That is pretty. Nice. Unstyled HTML, baby. Cool. So we've only got 10, and now what I want to do is experiment with loading more of these on. Oh, if I could dissect a sauropod, that's so close to a Flutter thing, maybe. Everything in Flutter is a pod. I want to load more of these on the client. How do I even begin thinking about this?
So let's start with like how the API works. Do we have something like pagination in the API?
Well,
or like alternatively, we could just have like the list of IDs and like fetch all IDs and then just lazy load the actual items.
Okay, that seems good. By the way, we've been joined by another Flutter Web aficionado. Hi, Kev.
Hi.
So, maybe we just ship these IDs down to the server as like as data in like a JSON script block or something. Is that fair to do?
As data, yes, we don't need to do JSON script block stuff because Jaspr can handle that.
Oh, okay. How do we do it?
So we have to create a new component. You can actually do like, if you select maybe the UL, like the HTML component that we return.
The UL here?
And do command dot, and there's like an extract code assist.
Extract a component here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this will be the news list component. Do you recommend reverse namespacing these with component at the end, or do you not do that?
I don't have a good recommendation. That is free to use.
Okay. In Flutter, we don't put widget at the end of every. Oh my god, I can't do that on all of these. We don't put widget at the end of every widget, so I'm not going to put component here. All right. So we've put news list down here. Looking good.
And then I would put that in a new file because. So what I'm getting is this one we now want to render on the client.
I see. Okay, cool.
So
you're going to come out. And then we have to bring in these imports. Oh, which of these should I do?
The
I'll just do all
standard
of
one. Yeah. As long as you can do the standard one, you should do it and only use the specific ones if you actually need to.
Oh, so we don't want to do this .elements anymore. We want to do this .items. So that would be final list item. So we'll bring in items, and then we're going to bring in the assembly of the elements into news list. There we go. Why are you mad? I grabbed the wrong item. There, that's the, it happened. Models.item, good. And now we just pass items into here, and news list needs to be imported. Okay, I think the refactor is complete. All right.
Yeah. I think so. We could put the styles also, or like it would be nice to put the styles also in the news list.
Oh, I need to bring the yes.
It's technically not required because it's separate, but it makes sense to look at them where you define it.
Yep, totally agree. It wouldn't have stopped working. It wouldn't have not compiled. It would have just been technical debt. So class name I'm also going to change to news list. Cool. All right. So you mentioned, and I guess we'll need to also put the IDs in here. Extra IDs. Final list int extra IDs. And now we need to pass those. And well, I already hate this function. I'm not going to make it better. I'm going to make it stupider. So it's going to return a record with the returns loaded items and IDs for unloaded items. That's what we're going to do. And here we're going to return then IDs dot sub list. And I guess this has to get a thing. 10. What's the problem? Value list item dynamic can't be returned. Load items because why is IDs.sublist returning? Is sublist not the correct thing? Isn't it? It's sublist.
You could do skip and then to list.
Yeah, there's some other issue. What is IDs? Oh,
that's that is untyped. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So now we can just do sublist. Wonderful. And now this returns items and extra IDs, which we pass. What?
I think.
Oh, do I have to type these things?
Yeah, I think the list list int won't work because the JSON decode returns a dynamic list.
Oh, this is not going to work?
No, the above where you added the list int.
Added the list int.
Yeah.
Oh, at runtime, this is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, can I cast it?
With with the dot cast. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that should work.
Cool. Great JSON decode, advanced knowledge to predict that error for us. Okay, now we can ship these extra IDs to the client. And how do you recommend we do that?
So one thing is to make that a component that is rendered on the client. You just add the @client annotation. I love that.
Yeah. Client. Okay.
And so what this does is like it takes this component and compiles it to JavaScript. Like that's the first thing. And the second thing is when we do hydrate, so like when we do first run the code on the client, we hydrate and we pick that component up. And then additionally, what Jaspr is doing is any parameters that you pass to it are also kind of passed from the server to the client. So it's this kind of magical thing of like you render it on the server with some parameters, and then it's also there on the client with the same parameters. But obviously, like it can't do magic, so it has to serialize everything.
Yeah.
So the parameters need to be serializable.
Okay. List of IDs
and
should
list
be.
int is, but list item is not. So that like item is not, or like at least Jaspr doesn't know yet how to do that.
But that's okay because these were just rendering on the server, and then these ones.
We probably don't need the items. We could just not do that for now. Like there's documentation on how to support custom models with serialization with Jaspr.
Yeah.
But probably we don't need to go into that now.
Yeah.
So we just need the IDs.
Only want to pass the IDs. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what you're saying, ServerPod has a similar thing where it needs to send custom models that the ServerPod team doesn't know about back and forth. And there's a way to tell it, hey, call this to JSON, call that from JSON.
Yeah.
So you have a similar thing, but we're not passing items, so we don't need to get into that. We're just passing this list of integers. Yeah. So how do I?
So we have to remove that parameter then.
Oh, I see. That's a little awkward.
Yeah. I wonder what's quicker.
Yeah, interesting. What if I did, I'm just going to get real nutty here. What if I did yield? Is there a script element? Mm-hmm. There is a script component. Cool. And it takes okay, something's wrong.
But then we can also use the Jaspr serialization if we want to. I think that's quicker.
All right. So are you recommending I don't do this?
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay. All right. So we need to tell it how to serialize the items, is what you're saying.
So I think the best way is to go into the docs and copy what's there and then modify it. Yeah, the first one.
Cool. All right, with the encoder decoder annotations, you can set up the things. And so on a model, we give it encode and decode. Cool. So we will go back to models item and do this. And we have to import these, and that'll just come from the main thing. So this is going to return an item, and to decode, we call item dot from map.
Item mapper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. From map, and we pass that data. Mm-hmm. Why is item mapper? Oh, and then is there like a dot item or something? No, what is the
what's a
undefined named item? Oh, it's item mappable?
No, it's item mapper.
I think it's because the build has failed.
Yeah, the build has failed.
We don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then to encode, we say just to map?
Yeah.
Or to?
Yeah, to map.
Okay. And that, of course, will work again once the build passes. So is that all we need to do for?
Yeah, that's all.
Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. That's super cool. What I'm really excited to see after this, and if this works, I think we will have built what we care about and can turn to some questions and wrap up. I want to see what's in the DOM. Mm-hmm. That'll be really interesting. And I'll look at chat while this builds. Tom, you caught something live. Here we are on what's that app that's like wildlife cams where people just put GoPros in the woods attached to some solar power, presumably, and then you watch deer and whatnot walk by. Yeah, you caught us. Okay, this built. So now item should be happy. It is happy again. So we can go back to the page, refresh, open the source, and oh, here we go. Oh, look at this. Okay. And this is going to be a very long.
Oh, yeah. That's a lot.
Nice. Yeah. Which we don't care about. So stop scrolling. I'll make this bigger so people can see. So this is what we've got happening. So this is just some magic DSL that is Jaspr specific. And you're reading this in some Jaspr glue code and making it available. And now we can, where would I write a method to, I'm going to close some of these other files. Where would I write a method to actually, like at client time, render the other IDs? Right? And we could even just print the IDs, I guess, but it'd be, yeah. Where
I mean,
where do I do that?
We can do like a if k is web sort of thing.
Oh, do we do that in build?
Yeah, let's try it.
So now we just do more building. Interesting. Okay. And I'm just going to print the IDs because what isn't important and useful is like grabbing this code, which obviously shouldn't have been here in the first place. We could put this in its own class and instantiate the class here and whatnot, but I'll just print the IDs. And I think that demonstrates what we care about. So this is extra IDs. So we are not going to see that print statement ever here. So I'm going to refresh and come back to the server, and the server does not print that. But in the console, we should see the IDs. So is not list int. Oh, well, it did work. So JSON dynamic. Oh, so there's like a typed list here.
I think it looks, I have to admit, it looks like something that Jaspr does wrong here. It's probably not typing or casting the list correctly. Can you try doing like a list dynamic just to see, and then I keep it in mind.
So I would put this here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Not bad. We've gotten pretty far. If this is the first bug that we've found, yeah, no error anymore. Okay, pretty good.
Okay.
We kicked a lot of tires with no bugs. All right. So this is that awkward handoff that I was talking about that is so miserable when you have. This is why JavaScript took over on the server, even though, some people like Python a lot better. Some people like Ruby a lot better. Some people like Java a lot better on the server. JavaScript had this unbelievable ace in the hole that it could play of only I can share code with the client and the server. And so Node on the server has become pretty darn dominant. And Dart is able to play that game. And Jaspr is doing it. That's awesome. I like it. All right. Well, hey, let's see what other questions we've got in the chat, and then we can wrap up and call this one an enormous victory. Of course. Well, it's not a live stream with Randall if we don't talk about Perl. All right. Salem really likes it. This has changed their mind about Dart on the web. Yes. Batrag, what the heck is this? Yeah, Jaspr, a web framework for Dart. That's right. All right, let's see. What was this question? Logan asked, can you make it private or something to hide it from serialization? I don't know. So they're kind of gesturing vaguely at this concept. I think that answer is no. There's no such thing as passing any information to the client in like a secret way.
I mean, you could encrypted and decrypted.
True, but the decryption code is sitting there on the client.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So there is no way to get around. If the client needs to render something, it's got to have the goods. You can load it, and then it's only in the network tab, but it's still there. So fair question though. It's a very different thing between web and mobile apps, like most. So for web, alternative widget is called a component. Yeah, that's true. Just scrolling through here, seeing if there's any other great questions. Can we use plain CSS? Yes, great question, and you can. React is not Dart. True. That's a factually accurate statement. Any other questions that you saw, Kilian, that we should hit? Oh, maybe change class name. Yeah, we did do that. Great call, Abdullah.
I'm seeing, can I convert my Flutter app to a Jaspr app?
Okay, I don't know where that is, but why don't you field it?
Yeah, to like touch on that topic again, Jaspr is a separate framework. So you have like you have to kind of then rebuild your app with Jaspr, which you can take over certain concepts, but like you can't just take your Flutter app and render it with Jaspr. So.
And you at the question of the day. All right, so yeah, there's no one-to-one translation between Flutter and Jaspr, but right, if you factor out all your state management, you can just fork at the UI layer only, which is such a cool thing. Gosh, that's so cool. I'm very into that possibility. I also just saw another question. Oh yeah, of course, a competition for the main question of the day. Can we see the real Jaspr?
It's not here. Well, I have that one.
All right, photo. Oh, the best, the absolute best. There was more.
Should I pick another one now?
Yeah, we need more photos of Jaspr. Okay. Great CTA from Randall here. Join the Jaspr Discord.
Oh yeah.
What about contributing? How could folks help?
Yeah, do that. I mean,
great.
it depends on what you want to do. I think so. You can obviously contribute to the framework itself, but a lot of help would also be like contributing packages, contributing to the ecosystem. Depends on how big you want to go, but you could make a component library. That would be kind of pretty much the big thing that Jaspr still misses, where you just have like pre-built components to get started quickly.
So this would be the equivalent. You have that for Tailwind, but for something else as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Bootstrap, material, whatever else.
Yeah.
What are I don't even know what the big CSS libraries are these days. I know Tailwind. Is Bootstrap serious? Is like Bootstrap still a thing?
I have no idea.
Yeah, me either. Boy, was it dominant 10 years
I think
ago.
they're like I think it goes more in like away from just CSS and more in like there are React component libraries and Vue component libraries and whatever. And yeah.
Well, Kilian, I got to say, I think this is one of the most enthusiastic receptions. There's not really been a lot of unenthusiastic receptions in the history of Observable Flutter, but this is maybe the most Jaspr strength. Oh boy. This is maybe one of the most enthusiastic receptions in the history of the show. So obviously you've built something that folks were looking for, and now they're aware that it exists, and that's awesome. Randall's committing to an upcoming website rewrite being with Jaspr. Love to see it. I'm very intrigued as well.
For like 6 months, I feel like. I'm still waiting for it.
Upcoming is vague, right? The term upcoming is very flexible and it's hard to pin down. 28 years from now, if he's still not done it, it's like, hey, upcoming, man. All right. Well, hey, Kilian, thanks so much for joining. This all happened because Kilian bumped into me at Flutter and Friends in Stockholm and said, hey, can I come on Observable Flutter? And I said, who are you? He said, I'm Kilian. I make Jaspr. And I said, oh my God. Yeah. And then here we are. First episode when I was back from Stockholm. Immediately we're talking about Jaspr. So thanks for having the approaching folks at conferences and whatnot can be intimidating, but thanks for just walking up, saying hi. And now everyone's very, very excited about Jaspr. So went according to plan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
go like to everyone, go try it out. I'd love to get feedback, and like there's a Discord, and we can like there's already some people in the community, and if you have questions, you can also ask there if I'm not around, but I'm probably around most of the time.
All right, cool. Well, folks, that will do it for today. And let's see, what is my upcoming schedule? Next week, the Dash team, which is Dart and Flutter, of course, has a summit in New York City. Many of us will be at FlutterCon in New York, but that on Thursday, I'll be at FlutterCon. So there won't be a stream. And then the next week, I'm going to be in Korea getting ready for the LG hackathon. And so there won't be a stream then either. And then I'll be back in the States and we will stream again. So a little gap between now and the next stream, but I've got some very fun guests queued up for October, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. And Kilian, any final thoughts?
As I said, just go ahead, try it, build your next website with Jaspr.
Okay, sounds great. I'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.